al centro, pero que ya al entrar ahí me sentí pues algo orgulloso, ¿verdad? De estar aquí en este centro de...
Cesar Chavez, the voice of resistance, a man focused around uniting the farm workers of America in order to provide them with better working conditions, increased wages, and medical coverage. Cesar Chavez's focus on uniting the farm workers of America created a form of revolution that would help kickstart the Chicano civil rights movement, a movement that would help drive home the idea that the Hispanic communities of America would no longer tolerate being discriminated against purely for being different. This movement influenced the U.S. government into providing improved conditions for migrant workers, the hiring of Chicano teachers, and more Mexican Americans serving as elected officials. Not only was Cesar Chavez influential to the Chicano movement, but different art forms created by the Chicano helped inspire Hispanic communities to rise up and strive towards equal rights. Artists such as Emigdio Vasquez proved that you don't need to march from one city to the next in order to protest for something you believe in. But prior to all of this, a singular event would inevitably cause the Chicano movement to occur, and it all started with a single war. Before the events of the Chicano movement, a war in the 1800s would cause a series of events to occur that would inevitably cause the uprisings of Hispanic communities in America, uniting them under the idea that they will be able to express their culture freely. The Mexican-American War of 1846 started because of the annexation of Texas on December 29, 1845, causing the President of Mexico, Mariano Paredes, to become furious because they claimed that Texas was still a part of Mexico. So on March 8, 1846, when General Zachary Taylor, leader of the U.S. Army, marched down to the Rio Grande and installed fortifications opposite of the Mexican city of Matamoros, spreading from Brownsville to Eagle Pass, President Paredes announced he will defend Mexico against the American invasion of Texas, in which he allowed General Mariano Arista to take control of the Mexican army and order the soldiers to cross the Rio Grande on April 24, 1845. The day after, a skirmish began at Rancho Carrecitos, in which Mexican forces captured 46 U.S. soldiers. The Mexican army then continued their assault when General Taylor left the fort with American forces to go to Point Isabel in order to get supplies for the U.S. fort. Once General Taylor got word of this conflict, he and the U.S. forces immediately returned to the U.S. fort in order to rescue and bring back the supplies to the remaining troops that were left to defend the base. When he returned, the Battle of Palo Alto began. At the end of the fight, both sides were left at a standstill, to where both armies would end up spending the night on the battlefield. The fight would then continue in the morning in the Battle of Resaca de la Palma, in which Arista's army is defeated and pushed back to Matamoros. At the end of this conflict, President James Polk received word of the skirmish at Rancho Carrecitos and asked Congress to declare war on Mexico on May 11, 1846. And just 2 days later, Congress officially declared war on Mexico. After the war was over, the United States of America came out victorious, in which Mexico was ordered to concede what would be modern-day Arizona, California, Colorado, Nevada, New Mexico, Utah, and Wyoming. They were also ordered to concede and recognize that 268,596 square miles of Texas territory now belonged to the United States, and that the Rio Grande would be recognized as its southern border. The United States ended up gaining over 525,000 square miles of territory, and roughly 115,000 Mexicans were integrated into the U.S. When the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo was signed, it stated that Mexicans who decided to stay inside of the U.S. were promised the right to their property, language, and culture. Ultimately, the land grants were denied by the U.S. government, causing many Mexican Americans who were land grant descendants to go into poverty. The treaty also stated that people of Mexican descent who lived in the United States would be eligible for naturalized citizenship, which at the time was only available to whites, hence making Mexican Americans white by treaty, protecting them from legal segregation. But that simply didn't stop the public's view on them. Mexican Americans were treated as second-class citizens, even though they were white by treaty, and were still hated simply because they were different, in which they were forced to continue to endure this discrimination until the 1960s. After the end of World War II, Mexican Americans were no longer willing to be treated as second-class citizens, go through limited education, and limited occupational opportunities. So, following the rise of the African American communities, who began to fight for their civil rights in 1954, the Hispanic communities of America united under the title Chicano and began to fight for the rights that they deserved in 1962. The Chicano movement all began with the help of one man, whose influence would solidify himself as one of the most influential Chicano civil rights activists in history, Cesar Chavez. Cesar Chavez was a Mexican American who devoted his life to improving the living conditions of Hispanic communities. He called his dedication La Causa, and it's mainly centered around the struggle of the farm workers of America. His impact helped improve the living conditions, working conditions, and raise the pay for American farm workers. He mainly accomplished this through the means of peaceful protests, such as boycotts and fasting. Cesar was born in Yuma, Arizona on March 31, 1927. In the late 1930s, Cesar and his family lost their homestead to foreclosure, so he and his family joined 300,000 other Mexicans and migrated to California during the Great Depression to become migrant farm workers. These events would influence him creating the National Farm Workers Association in 1962 with the help of Dolores Huerta and other Chicano activists. This organization was focused around the idea of uniting and protecting farm workers by committing peaceful protests. A majority of California's agricultural business relied on a corporatized system of farm production, with support from political allies that hired low-wage workers from Asian, Native, and Mexican populations. These farm workers were all under constant discrimination and dire working conditions, suffering from exposure to deadly chemicals, low amounts of food and water, and sexual harassment, all for a meager wage of $1 an hour. Some of the largest things the National Farm Workers Association did was starting the National Table Grape Boycott in 1965, the March from Delano to Sacramento in '66, and Cesar Chavez's 25-day fast over a violent depression on farm workers in '68. This movement allowed Cesar Chavez and his group to raise the wages of farm workers to $3 an hour in California in the 1980s, where it continued to rise to this day with the average hourly pay of migrant workers becoming $17 an hour. Cesar Chavez became a staple for the Chicano civil rights movement, leading the first successful farm workers union in American history, achieving dignity, respect, fair wages, medical coverage, pension benefits, and humane living conditions, as well as farm workers being granted countless other rights and protections. All of these allowed Cesar Chavez to become one of the most influential Chicano rights activists of his time. Cesar Chavez understood the impact art had within the Chicano movement, making many propaganda works of art himself for his activism efforts. Others within the movement also used art as a powerful component of their activism, inspiring others and showing what they believed in. The man whose art represented the most of the Chicano people and earned him the title, the godfather of Hispanic artists, was Emigdio Vasquez. Emigdio Vasquez was born on May 29, 1939, and grew up listening to stories from his father about the Mexican Revolution, in which he started drawing comic panels of the stories he was told, starting his art career in grade school. Vasquez earned his Associate Arts degree from Santa Ana College, to which he then transferred to California State University, where he earned a bachelor's degree in arts and a master's degree in fine arts, with one of his last projects being an 85-foot-long mural dedicated to the Chicano working class, with representing figures like his father and other relatives. Vasquez then went on to create over 30 public murals and over 400 fine art pieces, his most famous of which being his mural called The Legacy of Cesar Chavez, that's located at the Cesar Chavez Business and Computer Center in Santa Ana College. This art allowed him to express and give thanks to major parts of not only the hardworking Hispanic communities of America, but also to the ones that made those lives better. In conclusion, Cesar Chavez and Emigdio Vasquez had a large impact on Hispanic rights and responsibilities because of their ability to rise up and fight for the rights that the Hispanic community deserved because of the American government's failure to enact on the promise that they made at the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo at the end of the Mexican-American War, in which the government passed the Migrant and Seasonal Agricultural Protection Act in 1983, which gave even more rights to the farm workers of America, giving them better ways of living through better wages, better housing, and better working conditions from farm labor contractors. But if there is one thing to take away from Cesar Chavez and his movement, it's the fact that we cannot seek achievement for ourselves and forget about progress and prosperity for our community. Cesar Chavez.